to Lex Reads. So in today's video, I wanted to share 10 of my classic Black books. They're books that have been written back in the day and they are considered classics. So before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So like I said, I wanted to share 10 books by Black authors. So the first I would say is an author that she really does need to get her shine and recognition. She has many books, but she is known for this one specific book, and it is Gloria Naylor, The Women of Brewster's Place. This was actually one of our book club picks last year, and we had such an amazing discussion. This is a conversational piece. This also reads like short stories. You get and meet about, I want to say 7 or 8 women. Every woman has their story, and you see why they have ended up in the Brewster's projects. I would say my favorite, ooh, I do like the couple Lorraine and Teresa. So you meet actually 7 women. And like I said, first you have Maddie Michaels. She is a woman that has a son. Some things happen. She has to go to the Brewster's project. But when you find out what happened, before she got there with like her home life and how she ended up getting pregnant, and it's a whole situation, okay? Next, I do like Etta Mae Johnson. That is Maddie's longtime friend. They've known each other, and she fast. I usually always like the fast ones. She real fast. She get around. It's like, I'm a go where the dollar is, meaning I'm gonna get a man that got some money. If I get sick of him or if he gets sick of me, I go on to the next. Then you have Kaswana. Kaswana, she grew up, with privilege, but she wants to be like down with the people. So she feels like, oh well, if I can be like in the struggle with you, then I can kind of see like, and be down. Yeah. Then you have Seal. Seal has known Maddie Michael ever since she was a little girl, and something horrible happens to her. Horrible, okay? And oh, it breaks your heart. Yeah, it just breaks your heart. Then you have Cora Lee. Cora Lee, she has about, oh, the girl, 6 kids with 6 baby daddies, and her situation. But she has this thing with babies. She likes when they are babies, but when they grow up, can't stand them. Lastly, we have Lorraine and Teresa. They are a lesbian couple, but they have to keep it on the low because of who they are. Things happen to both of them, but mainly Lorraine. So those are the women that you will meet within the Women of Brewster's Place. Also, there was a TV movie that Oprah did in the 80s, and when I tell you, it is fantastic. It's actually a mini series. You know how some like TV shows or movies, they don't fall with the book. They take stuff out and add stuff that's unnecessary. That TV movie did not do that. You almost, if I'm being honest, you don't even have to read the book. If you watch the movie, it's like you're reading the book. I mean, I would encourage you to read the book, but you actually don't have to. That's how well they did that film. Also, there is a like sequel to this book. It is called The Men of Brewster's Place, and you will learn more about the men in this story, like Maddie Michael's son, Seal's husband, some other men. But yeah, there is a sequel to this book, but I would say this, fantastic. Next is The Street by Ann Petry. I actually have 2 copies of this book. When I first read this, I read out of this book. I actually have a reading blog on this book, and I got this from a library sale for like $1. Also too, I wanted to get this book because there is a blurb by Gloria Naylor, the one that we just talked about. So when I saw that, I'm like, I have to read this. But Ann Petry, she was the first Black woman to sell 1 million copies. And the crazy thing is, you made that milestone and you were first, and not a lot of people know her. That fascinates me. But with The Street, I would say, oh, you do have to get your mind right. It is about a young woman and her child. She becomes a domestic and she sacrifices a lot because there's no money, basically. And she got a little trifling little husband, and oh my goodness. I think I'm gonna put that video down below, the reading vlog of The Street. You guys know I like to read passages of, the book, so you guys can get a gist of the author's writing. But that husband, oh girl, he just, yeah. I can't even talk. That's how much he just got on my nerves. You just see the financial struggle and woes. And I would say the ending, although it was heartbreaking, I don't want to say it was necessary, but it was, and I don't want to say you could kind of understand a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, oh, girl, no. Because my thing is, yeah, I almost told y'all the tea. Again, I'm being around the bush because I don't want to give it away. This is also a book where it's hard to explain it without giving it away because there's so many layers to this book, so many layers to the characters and the story, and also like an extra character you would say is the street, because it's just so much going on that street. Next, of course, this is like the epitome of, Black classics. Like, you have to have this. We should know all about this. Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the miseducation of the Negro. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have a Black History Month. It basically started out a Black History Week, and then they extended it to a Black History Month. And with this is nonfiction, but I love the way that he talks about the school system when it comes to Blacks, how they try to limit us. And especially back in the day, they did, and to a certain extent a little bit today. It's so unfortunate where if you want a good education, it's like you have to go to a predominantly white school because they're going to have the access to everything. Growing up, I was raised by two teachers that taught in the Flint school systems. I just remember my aunts coming home talking about just like, there's no money in the district. And then, me and my sister going to an all white, suburban school where you didn't lack for anything. Okay, we had map books and new textbooks. You even had the option of, you would read literature. If you didn't want to buy the brand new book, they had the books for you. Of course, me being who I was, I wanted a copy for myself, wanted to be nice and brand new. But the fact that they had that option, also the fact that they had enough for the students, just little things like that. And he talks about that. Remember while reading this, I'm like, this was like written in the 1900s, and the fact that it was so relevant, he hits the nail on the head. Also talks about, parents and your family, you should really not only have the teachers in the school system teach your child, you should also at home teach them, especially about, Black individuals, Black events. Of course, they're going to withhold that from the schools, especially if it's a Black person that, did things, or or made a contribution. They're not really going to talk about that. So yeah, this fantastic. I also have 2 copies of this. Of course, I wanted to get this edition because it is in the Penguin Classic Edition, the Black Spines. I really do. You guys know how much I love those. I, collect them. So also displayed in my library because I just, it's just Black excellence. Next is another Black text that everyone should read, not only just Black people, but of course, we should be the first. It is W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks. I think I also have another copy of this, but of course, Penguin Classic Edition, love it, had to get it. And with W. Du Bois, his stance was learning and really immersing yourself in culture, in arts, as opposed to, Booker T. Washington. His thing was, that ain't gonna get you nowhere. You need a trade, okay? Which I can see both of their stances. I do believe that you do need to have culture in your, life, because that's development. Again, generalizing, but how society pegs Black people of not, knowing things, or not knowing, something like classical music or artwork. And it's like, no, we know all of that, okay? But I do think that, like he stated, that is something that you do need to know. Have a cultural aspect. Go to the theater, go to the museum, know about artists, know about, music, know about all of these things. It doesn't hurt. So yeah, I really did enjoy this. And I also think too, my major was sociology, and I found it so interesting. I remember I thought about this after college, where he was a sociologist, right? And all of those classes that I took in undergrad, they did not mention his name at all. It was always Karl Marx and was Freud and all of them. And it's like, how can you not mention W.E.B. Du Bois? He's a sociologist. See? Again, what Carter was talking about, we got to teach that at home. We have to teach about our people. Next is another author that is well known because he's known for one book that, I mean, everybody knows. I have not read it, which, oh, I'm so ashamed that I have not read that book. And I have a physical copy and I have audio. But the book that I like by him, first of all, the author is Alex Haley, and the book is Queen. I have two copies of Queen. I actually read out of this copy because I hate mass market paperbacks, but I wanted to get this edition because this is the movie cover. It was a miniseries that was in 1993, and Halle Berry, she plays Queen. Queen was Alex's great grandmother on his father's side, I believe, and you see her life. I mean, you see her parents' life, and obviously you see Queen's life and just the woes that she had to go through. That woman went through a life, you hear me? And also, just like Women of Brewster's Place, the miniseries is fantastic. I would say the miniseries, they do leave out the beginning part, which is basically them. The beginning part is actually a bore. Oh my goodness, but they're setting up the history, okay, because it's talking about Queen's, white ancestors and all of that. That part was, it was very boring. Once her mother was born, then that's when it picked up. Also, you can watch the miniseries in one day. It's not like Roots where that has to take you a couple of days. You actually can watch the miniseries in one day. Now, it will take you the whole day, but you can watch the miniseries. I've seen that movie 1,000 times, quoted all the time. I mean, yeah. Like I told you guys, I tend to enjoy slavery themed books, slave narratives. I like to learn that time in history. This just talks about, again, her being, enslaved. It talks about Emancipation Proclamation. It talks about some passing. It talks about the quadroon balls where you had, black women that they look white, but they would, go to these quadroon balls and get these men. And the men, they knew that they were black. They did. But their thing is, we don't care about that. You look white and it's just between me and you. And some of them women, a lot of those women, they would get, property and, some financial backing, but it talks about that. And yeah, fantastic. Speaking of slavery themed books and slave narratives, this is another slave narrative that I don't think a lot of people talk about, but it is a classic, and it is Josiah Henson. He was the inspiration of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. And the term Uncle Tom, that's a bad term. Basically, they're saying that, we fell into white people, we being a coon. I became aware of Josiah Henson because of The Jeffersons, you guys, the TV show, which is one of my favorites. And I think it was one of the first seasons, or one of them first or second season. You always call me Uncle Tom. Do you know who Uncle Tom, was? And George like, oh, that was that, dumb N-word. He's like, another one of the lies that we have accepted. No. Josiah Henson was a pioneer in his right. He walked all the way from Canada to Kentucky with his family. They started the first manual trade school for enslaved people. He became a leader in the Afro-Canadian community. He was a pioneer in his right, okay? And the fact that he did all of that. He was separated from his wife and children, and he made it a way to escape with both, was able to do that. But in his book, he does talk about the struggle of obviously being enslaved, how he was, in bondage, how he starved, how the way they just treated him, and just, again, everything that comes along with slavery. I would say this is one of my favorite slave narratives. Next is Elizabeth Kingsley, Behind the Scenes, or 30 Years a Slave. I always talk about her because this is another book that I don't think gets the, praise and recognition that as it should. She was a confidant and dressmaker of Mary Todd Lincoln, who was Abraham Lincoln's wife. In her book, she got a lot of slack because she did talk about, the Lincolns, not in a bad way. She did bring them up because she was best friends with his wife. And when he was murdered by John Wilkes Booth, only person she wanted to talk to and request to see was Elizabeth Kingsley. All the dresses that you see of Mary Todd Lincoln that is photographed is made by Elizabeth Kingsley. Next is Maya Angelou, Gather Together in My Name. Now, this is probably my second favorite. Of course, everyone knows I Know the Caged Bird Sings. That is fantastic. I mean, top tier. But this book is just as good as I Know the Cage Bird Sings. I would say this got, like I always say, drama and tea. This, you're gonna meet Maya after she has her son. She was what, 15, going on 16. She's a new mother, new young mother. Maya goes through some stuff, y'all. She almost becomes what, a madam, and work in a whorehouse, and she get beat by one of her lovers, and oh, all the jobs that she does and tries to do. Like when I was reading this book, it was like, oh Maya, you going through all of this. Can you just go back home to your mama? Because Lady, like they called her mom, Lady said, you will always have a home. You can always come back home. But you know, when you're that young, you think you know everything, and she wanted to kind of get away, but it's like you struggling, and you could, you know, relieve yourself a little bit. Go back home. But in this book, she does discover herself, you know, learns how to be a fantastic mother. And she had to go through those trials and tribulations in order to get, you know, where she needed to go to. Next is James Baldwin, The Amen Corner. Now, we all know that James Baldwin, he is known for his like critical analysis books, but he does have fictional works. And 2 or 3 years ago, I took it up on myself to read all of his fictional works. And when I tell you, fantastic, okay? This is actually a play. And this was a play that was on Broadway. And this is about a young woman. She is a minister of a church. She, you know, she runs a church, and her congregation is kind of leery and a little bit scared that she's gonna go back to, like, not her old ways, but her husband, he a little jazz musician or something like that, and he kind of step away, okay, and go into the world, and he comes back. He's like estranged, and he comes back, and her congregation is afraid that she's gonna like basically go back to him and kind of, you know, do what he's doing. And yeah, when I say church mess, church mess. This was so good. It was funny, yet it was serious. And I think a lot of people, when they, you know, do mention James Baldwin's fictional work, you know, they always say like Another Country, which that's probably my second favorite. But this, if you guys are looking for a good play, something that's short and sweet, that is funny, has some serious bits, you're going to learn something without feeling like you're learning something, you need to pick up The Amen Corner. And lastly is The Big C by Langston Hughes. This is one of Langston Hughes' autobiography. He has a second one. Like, this is the first installment, and then he has a second installment. I do need to get that second one. I wanted to get the first one because he does talk about his life in Kansas. He talks about how he got started, you know, how he went to Harlem and really got immersed in the Harlem Renaissance. Of course, you cannot mention the Harlem Renaissance without mentioning Langston Hughes. I remember when I first got into reading the Harlem Renaissance, I was not only, you know, interested in the author's, you know, works, but like their personal life. And especially during that time, during the Harlem Renaissance, because there was a lot of, you know, things that went on, mainly what I would say with their sexuality, that they had to keep it, you know, a bay, because that was just, you know what I mean? You just couldn't, you know, be your true authentic self. And he does hint a little bit. You know, Langston, he didn't talk about his little sexual escapades or whatever, but everybody know what he preferred, okay? But, you know, he does weave that in a little bit of some other, you know, artists that struggle with that. And if you do read the Harlem Renaissance, there are some, actually a lot of poems, plays, stories, short stories of like homosexuality, because that was their way of, you know, getting it out, expressing themselves. So they did it through their literature. You really do get in the nitty gritty of his life, and the fact that he wrote it, not anyone else, but he wrote it, and you get his thoughts, was one thing I really did like about it, because, you know, he was telling his truth. So yes, one for the book. So yeah, guys, that is it when it comes to my 10 classic books by Black authors. These books, in my opinion, you learn things, but it's not like hitting you over the head with it. You're still entertained. There's a variety of works. You know, you have some nonfiction, you have some plays, you have some, slave narratives, you have some slavery themed books, you have, literary fiction. It's just all in one. And it's great that these are classic books. Yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. And I'll be back with more Black books. Bye.